Hello class, this is Mrs. Ohms. We are continuing on in Chapter 5, Understanding Your Legal Obligations. We are on 5.2, which is Understanding Your Legal Responsibilities. I skipped a page. Yeah, we mentioned patient and client rights in the last 5.1, but it's important for healthcare workers to remember that patients and clients have rights that represent not only moral and ethical issues, but also rights legislated by both federal and state government. It is each healthcare worker's responsibility to recognize the importance of treating patients' clients with dignity. A list of patient-client rights is meaningless unless the person is working with the patient understands and follows them. All healthcare workers must commit to giving the best possible care, which means complying with the professional standards of care for their particular profession. Some of the resources for ensuring legal compliance: policies, offices, and agencies exist to ensure that everyone working in a hospital practices and monitors legal behavior. An ombudsman is a social worker, nurse, or trained volunteer who makes certain that the patient-client is not abused and that the person's rights are secured. Licensure is given, this was part of your remote learning, licensure is given by the governmental agency when a person meets the qualifications for a particular occupation, so hence you get your nursing license or things like that. Certification is given to individuals who meet certain predetermined criteria and standards set for their occupation, and registration is a list of individuals on an official record who meet the qualifications for an occupation. Example, registered nurse, registered dental assistant. Registered nurses are registered with the state in which they practice. So if you guys wanted to look me up on the Illinois state registry, you could find me. You can look and see if I've ever been disciplined, which I have not, and things like that. So same thing for other people that hold licenses. You can look up and see if they've ever had anything against their license. Confidentiality. Patient-client information is confidential. Healthcare workers are obligated to protect and keep all patient-client information confidential. A good rule is to discuss a patient-client only when the discussion affects his or her care in some way. A medical facility, a physician, or a healthcare worker can be fined, sued, or lose his or her job for sharing any information about patient clients with others, including family members. The privileged communication covers any personal or private information given by a patient client to medical personnel that is relevant to his or her care. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA. A patient's medical information is protected by the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA. This law regulates the sharing of medical information. All employees of healthcare systems are required to comply with the HIPAA regulations that apply to their jobs. Confidential communications are protected under law against any disclosure, forced or voluntary, over the objection of the patient. Certain information may be considered exempt, such as suspected fraud. Births and deaths are posted publicly. Illnesses and injury caused by violence, drug abuse, communicable disease, and sexually transmitted diseases. So we're right now in a pandemic, that's a severe communicable disease. So there's to trace that down and get a handle of it. There are some exemptions for confidentiality right now on that too. Understanding elements of a contract. Contracts are legal documents that are often used to define the terms of patient care. Examples include the document patients sign declaring that they have been made aware of the terms of HIPAA regulation, as well as an advance directive document declaring their preference in accepting or refusing medical care under certain circumstances. Contracts are enforceable by law and are composed of three main elements: offer, acceptance, and consideration. Contracts can either be implied or expressed. Natural death guidelines and declarations. Each state has adopted natural death guidelines and declarations that give direction to people about how to legally tell others their desire concerning end-of-life issues. These documents, called an advance directive, ensure the individual the right to accept or refuse medical care. A formal contract will identify the agent, sometimes they're referred to as the proxy, or healthcare surrogate, the patient has appointed to make decisions on his or her behalf. The contract will specify the directive, which states the patient's wishes in the case of a terminal illness or irreversible condition. Living wills. A living will is a document prepared by a patient. This document gives instructions about the health care to be provided if the patient becomes terminally ill or falls into a permanent coma or persistent vegetative state. A living will specifies whether the patient wants to be kept on life support machines. It may also contain a do not resuscitate or DNR order. A living will should be on file with the patient's general health care provider. Healthcare or durable power of attorney. Some patients may choose to legally appoint a healthcare power of attorney or proxy. A healthcare proxy is a family member or close friend who is trusted to make healthcare decisions on behalf of the patient. The healthcare proxy is asked to make decisions only when the patient can no longer think clearly or communicate. The patient may also choose to write down instructions for the treatment in a living will. If a patient recovers and is able to communicate, the patient then regains the right to make healthcare decisions. Patient Self-Determination Act, or PSD, was passed in Congress in November of 1990 as an amendment to the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1990. And if you remember from last 5.1, that was the act that made residents' rights for nursing homes. The law requires that most healthcare institutions, not individual doctors, inform a patient at the time of admission or enrollment of their rights and their policies regarding advance directives, that is, living will or power of attorney of healthcare, in their state and in the institution itself. Patient rights include the right to participate in and direct their own healthcare decisions, and the right to accept or refuse medical or surgical treatment, the right to prepare an advance directive. Okay, and that is it for that lesson. Thank you.